Has your class ever made the teacher cry? What happened? Our form tutor was a kindly middle-aged Welsh gal, pure as anything, just happy to be doing her job. But teenagers being who they are, it made her a joke too many. She announced to the class she'd be leaving at the end of the term or year etc. And they all cheered and whooped. She left the classroom in tears. Kids can be a-holes. Angry tears. Had a history teacher one year. Really good teacher. He had a teenage son who had committed suicide. And after he took some time off, he came back to work. Standard class clown kid started acting up in his class. Teacher asks him to go into the hallway so he can speak with him privately. We heard their exchange get a little heated, but this kid just cranked it to 11 and insinuated such as kid was right to kill themselves with a father like him. Heard that kid bounce off some lockers about a second after. Teacher came back into the room with angry tears and told one of us to call the school resource officer. It became a big hullabaloo and teacher ended up suspended for the rest of the year. At the time I thought it was crazy he'd shove that kid like that. 15 years later and some real world experience later, I'm surprised that's all he did. Multiple times. We were a terrible class. She was our 6th grade teacher. Our school had this odd system where you had a homeroom teacher for most of the day, but then rotated around to other teachers for just a few classes. Our homeroom teacher was also the music teacher, and for some reason during music class all hell would break loose. She went on vacation for a week and came back with a bad sunburn around the eyes, so we would only call her MRS, Raccoon. It caused her to get more tanning done. During one music class she really had to go to the washroom, so she left for about 4 seconds and a fight broke out between a boy and a girl. The girl took the boy's head and threw it through a snare drum. He got stuck in there. She came back to thinking he was dead. Eventually she had a mental breakdown mid-class and ran out into the hallway crying. The 7th grade teacher saw this and instead of consoling her walked in and just let us have it. I'll never forget that day. He said we were spoiled day-hats for treating a teacher who only ever wanted to help us like trash. He screamed that if he had a teacher like her when he was a kid he would do everything he could to keep her. Yelled that if we kept acting this way we were in for a life of disappointment brought on by our own rampant incompetence. It worked. Some of us cried, but everyone felt horrible and we were all nice to her for the remaining year. I remember in high school getting a teacher fresh out of uni. He was the best, super passionate about teaching, and would often incorporate music and comedy into his teaching to make it more interesting. Almost everyone in the class loved him because of it. There were 3 footy players who would always play up in class though, and the teacher spent extra attention on them, trying to get them just as excited about learning as the rest of the class, but they were simply too cool to pay attention in class. One day they took it too far. I can't remember the exact details, but I do remember that one of the footy players threw a chair as a joke either at another student or at the teacher himself and it just broke the poor guy. He lost his shit at the unruly students, and you could see the pure frustration in his face. He just wanted to teach, but these few students were hellbent on ruining it for everyone. He ended up just leaving the classroom in tears, and everyone in the class quickly turned against the kids who threw the chair. Teacher posted pictures of her old spaniel everywhere. Well, eventually it got sick and died. She took a few days off and was devastated. Class worked with the school and each other to pull the funds to get her a new puppy spaniel. We presented it to her when she returned and she was so happy she cried. Teacher here. I was witness to the death of one of my former students. Pedestrian hit by a car right outside my apartment. This was pretty common knowledge to my students, and during a Kahoot game one of them put her name as their nickname. Couldn't help tearing up, and I let the waterworks start during my prep period. Someone made the math teacher cry by saying math is the devil. Her license plate was math and so you know she was serious about it. Man, so much character development in such a short comment. We had a substitute once, and one of the football jocks went behind her and pretended to hump her. She glared back at him and began bawling. Poor lady. In 5th grade, my class was always extremely nasty to every substitute teacher that came in. They'd act out, doing and saying stupid sh, and though we never actually saw any of them cry, our regular teacher told us on multiple occasions that we'd left the substitute in tears after class was done. I hated every time there was a substitute because it would always become a show. Also in middle school we had a teacher that started out extremely chill. She said she didn't believe in yelling at students. Unfortunately though, a lot of the same little shits from my 5th grade class were in this class too, plus new ones. I don't remember what the cause was exactly, but one day she just snapped and screamed at us for a good 10 minutes. She definitely believed in yelling at students after that. It's one of the few things from middle school I remember clear as day. I had a French teacher once. We were her first class since becoming a teacher. Lovely woman, but many of us suspected she has mental health problems. Always very quiet and mousy, and she always came in looking a bit messy, i.e. hair not brushed and makeup a bit smudged. There were these 2 girls who would just torment her. They had pickled muscles around the classroom and were just these loud obnoxious assholes. Long story short, turns out the teacher's mum had just died, and on top of the stress of managing a class with some real horrible kids, she had a nervous breakdown and never came back. About 2 years later I was going to a concert and saw her begging for money outside a train station. Just felt so horrible seeing what she had been reduced to, all because of some nasty fuckling kids that just pushed her and pushed her. This is a long one, but here goes. When I was about 14-15, my school had an awesome young science teacher, fresh out of university, eager to do well in his first job, passionate about his subject, and always staying late to help out the kids who needed the extra help. Unfortunately he was super timid and shy, and not very good at handling behavioral issues. Naturally the shtier kids, and even the ones you would expect better from, found it fun to completely take advantage of this, and it soon became a common game to just see who could do their best at making his life hell. I never saw him cry myself, but I did see him get pushed to his limits, and one day I heard he had a bit of a breakdown. I can't remember exactly what I was told happened, but he fled a classroom on the verge of tears, and some of the other teachers needed to step in to get the class back under control. Anyway, one Monday we found out he had passed away the day before from an undetected heart problem. His father went to his house the previous Sunday morning when he didn't turn up for their golf session, and found him dead in his bed. He was 24. Needless to say, all of the kids who tormented him felt absolutely awful about it. One girl in particular confided in me about how she felt so terrible. She knew he was a great teacher, but she joined in with the pack, and now she had to live with knowing this young, kind teacher died, and all she had ever done was contribute to making his life difficult. A lesson for young Redditors: treat your teachers well. They've dedicated themselves to giving you your education, something many people in this world aren't lucky enough to have. They're people like you and me, people just trying to do their jobs well. My mother is an English teacher, and the stress kids put her under resulted in her mental and physical health declining to the point of needing to leave the job. Again, teachers are people, mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters. Treat them like and you will grow up to regret it, and you'll deserve every ounce of the guilt you feel. When I was in HS we were misbehaving as a whole group, just making noise and not listening and messing around and finding just about everything that was happening far too funny. Nothing too major. A few of us got sent out to stand in the corridor until she got a handle on things. When she came out to speak to us, one dude was leaning up against the door frame with his hand, and upon realizing we couldn't contain our laughter at this point, she decided to leave us out there and stormed back into the class, slamming the door. It was at this point the dude screamed with the force of 1,000 suns. I hadn't heard anything quite like it. Teacher comes back out instantly, steam bellowing out of her ears, ready to completely destroy our childhoods. She turned to the kid and noticed the end of his finger hanging off. Instantly realizing she'd shut it in the door, her mood changed just as quickly, and she just broke down into tears. I would have felt bad, but it just topped off the list of things I shouldn't have been laughing at already. The whole class knew our teacher loves us so much. On her birthday, we decided to surprise her once she enters the classroom after the flag ceremony. We divided into 2 groups. Some of us are together with the teacher during flag ceremony, and some are waiting for the flag ceremony to end and are trying to hide in certain places in the classroom. The teacher had no clue of what was actually happening, and when she arrived together with some of our classmates, we started singing happy birthday to her. She was so shocked you can clearly see her trying to hold her tears. It was the class' most successful birthday surprise. It was the end of the day and a whole bunch of us 9-year-olds were getting ready to go home when this kid who was always trying to make trouble started arguing with the teacher about the next day's homework, and she made some comment about his mom, and then he made a rude joke about the teacher's mom and she burst into tears and screamed her mom was dead. Then we sat in silence for like 5 minutes while the teacher cried. It was middle school band. About 70 kids with instruments. And about half of those kids would not stop playing them super obnoxiously. Props to the teacher for keeping it together as long as she did though. 7th grade English, we were still breaking down parts of speech. Our teacher, let's call her MRS, was trying extra hard to be happy and get our attention and asked one of the worst behaved kids for an example of a sentence so we could break it down as a class. He waited till the room was silent, looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Mrs. T is a bad teacher." She put it up on the board and broke it down through tears. Still makes me mad over 15 years later. Elementary music teacher here. The art teacher next door was having trouble with her classroom behavior management. The assistant principal entered her room while she had a class and completely undermined her. Assistant principal told her she didn't know what she was doing in front of the kids and redirected the class to show art teacher how it's done. Art teacher threw a fit, cursed her out, and left smack dab in the middle of the school day. Luckily my instincts kicked in and I told my app to just bring the rest of her classes to me that day, and I had 2 classes at a time that day. I get that she needed to fix her management skills, but it's like teacher code. You don't undermine another teacher in front of students. I'm a college teacher in the UK. Absolutely love my job. Love helping the kids I teach and love helping them reach their uni courses. Never really had many issues with most of my classes, but I had this one class that was real lazy, never did their work etc. They got a real result back one lesson. Average mark was like 30%. I said something in passing and a student made a comment about how I shouldn't guilt trip them. I explained how I felt like I was working harder than they were and I felt like I cared more about their result than they did, despite they would be going to uni. At the time I was going through a breakup and was living in my car for a few days and I cried then in front of that class. Awful moment, professionally speaking. In 5th grade, we had a psychotic substitute teacher, probably in his late 50s. At the beginning of class, everyone was goofing off and he immediately shut us down by screaming "shut up" at us, shaking furiously. We all stayed silent after that because he legit freaked us out, but we came to the conclusion that he was hearing voices in his head, because about 20 minutes into class, he stopped talking abruptly and screamed at us again at the top of his lungs that we would regret being so loud, but no one had uttered a effing word. He then stomped over to the desk, violently swept everything off, muttering the entire time to himself, then went to the back of the room and turned all of the lights off. We were all terrified at this point. He silently paced around the back of the room for a while, then went back to the front and slapped the chalkboard. His next words were what I remember the most clearly. He was violently shaking as he yelled, "I'm going to tell your teacher how horrible of a class you all are when she gets back, and I'll make sure she burns you up. To hell with all of you." He threw himself back into the teacher's chair and started sobbing. One of my classmates managed to sneak out and get the principal. He was escorted from the classroom a few minutes later, and we all had to individually go into the principal's office and recount what happened. Apparently he had just gotten a divorce and he had lost it. He was fired that same day. Honestly, I don't think we actually did anything to warrant his initial reaction. He just snapped.